I had always been drawn to old houses, the kind that seemed to carry stories in their walls, whispers of the past embedded in the very floorboards. So when I found the Victorian on the outskirts of town, it felt like destiny. The locals called it haunted, a place where shadows moved and time felt thick, but I was eager to restore it, to breathe life back into its creaky bones. I didn't believe in ghosts, at least not in the way people told stories about them, but the house's atmosphere was undeniably heavy, like it was holding its breath. The first night I spent there was oddly quiet. I'd spent the day hauling boxes and cleaning, peeling back layers of dust and neglect. As night fell, the old house seemed to stretch and sigh around me, the wooden floors creaked under my steps, and the wind rattled the windows just so. I was alone, but the space felt crowded with the past, memories I couldn't see but somehow sensed. At first, I chalked it up to nerves, the natural unease of being somewhere unfamiliar. Around midnight, I was still unpacking in what would be my study, a small room at the back of the house with a single window overlooking the overgrown garden. That's when I heard it, faint, almost a whisper, like the rustling of fabric or hushed voices, coming from the attic above. The sound was so subtle I thought I might have imagined it. But then there was a soft footstep, deliberate and slow, like someone pacing just out of sight. I froze, heart hammering. The attic was off limits for now, I hadn't even dared to climb the narrow staircase leading up there. It was supposed to be empty, a dusty storage space filled with forgotten relics. Yet something was definitely moving up there, or at least making noise. Even though a part of me wanted to ignore it, curiosity pushed me forward. I grabbed the flashlight from my bag and made my way to the staircase. The wooden steps groaned under my weight, echoing through the silence. As I reached the attic door, the whispers stopped abruptly. I hesitated, hand on the knob, feeling a chill that wasn't just from the cold air seeping through the cracked window panes. Slowly, I pushed the door open and shone the flashlight inside. The beam revealed a cluttered space filled with dusty trunks, old furniture draped in white sheets, and cobwebs stretching across the rafters. The air was noticeably colder here, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones. I swept the light around, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. No shadows shifting, no figures lurking. Just silence and the faint creak of the house settling. I was about to close the door when a sudden draft swirled past me, carrying with it the faintest scent of lavender and something else, old wood and decay. It was a strange combination, both comforting and unsettling. I took a step inside, the floorboards cold beneath my feet. Then I heard it again, a soft whisper, barely audible, as if someone was murmuring just beyond the edge of my hearing. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I called out, my voice cracking slightly, "Hello? Is someone there?" The attic responded only with silence, but the air grew heavier, pressing against me like an invisible weight. I felt a presence, something unseen but undeniably close. I wanted to run, to slam the door and never look back, but something held me there. It was curiosity, yes, but also a strange pull, as if the house itself was trying to communicate. I spent the next hour moving through the rooms, flashlight in hand, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. Lights flickered unexpectedly, shadows shifted just beyond the beam's reach, and sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a fleeting shape, a movement too quick to identify. In the kitchen, a chair scraped softly against the floor, though no one was there. In the hallway, the air turned icy cold, and I shivered despite my jacket. I began to realize this was no ordinary house. The stories weren't just local superstition, something restless lingered here. I tried to rationalize it. Old houses make noises, shadows play tricks, and my imagination was running wild in the darkness. But deep down, I knew this was different. There was a history here, something buried beneath the peeling wallpaper and cracked ceilings that refused to stay silent. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake listening to the house's creaks and groans, the faint whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. I wondered what had happened here, who had lived and died within these walls, and why their presence still clung to the place so stubbornly. By morning, I was exhausted but determined. I couldn't let fear stop me from uncovering the truth of this house. There was something here, something that wanted to be found, and I was going to find it, no matter how unsettling it might be. The next day, I began researching the house's past, hoping to find clues that might explain the strange occurrences. But even as I delved into old records and newspaper archives, the house seemed to grow more restless. At night, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent, and the shadows deepened, as if the house itself was alive and watching. I didn't know what awaited me in the attic or what secrets the walls held, but I was beginning to understand that this was only the beginning. The house had stories to tell, and somehow, I was now a part of them. As days turned into nights, the house's eerie atmosphere seemed to grow thicker, pressing down on me with an almost tangible weight. I found myself unable to shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that the very walls were watching, waiting. To make sense of it all, I decided to dig deeper into the house's history, hoping to find some explanation for the strange events. In the town library, buried among yellowed newspapers and brittle records, I came across the story of Mrs. Agnes Whitmore, the last tenant before the house fell into disrepair. She was an elderly woman who lived here for decades, known to the locals as a recluse with a sharp mind and a wary gaze. According to a few scattered accounts, Agnes had reported unsettling occurrences, shadowy figures moving through the halls, voices whispering in the dead of night, and cold spots that seemed to follow her like a phantom chill. One particular account caught my attention. Neighbors had heard her screaming late one night, followed by the sound of furniture crashing violently. No one dared investigate, fearing what they might find inside. Agnes was later moved to a nursing home, reportedly traumatized by the experiences, and the house was left empty. Reading about her ordeal sent a shiver down my spine. It was as if her fears had seeped into the very fabric of the house, lingering long after she was gone. That night, as I settled into the creaking old armchair by the fireplace, the house seemed to pulse with a restless energy that mirrored hers. Around midnight, the silence shattered. A piercing scream echoed through the halls, chilling me to the core. It was a sound filled with terror and despair, raw and primal. I froze, heart pounding, listening as the noise died away, leaving an oppressive stillness in its wake. The house groaned, furniture scraping and clattering as if tossed by invisible hands. Chairs overturned, drawers slammed shut, and the chandeliers swayed though there was no breeze. The air grew heavy, thick with an unseen presence that filled every corner. I wanted to flee, to escape the chaos, but something held me rooted to the spot. Perhaps it was empathy for Agnes, or the need to understand what haunted this place. The fear was overwhelming, but I forced myself to move, moving through the rooms with trembling hands, trying to find the source. In the dim hallway, shadows twisted and writhed, taking shapes that defied reason. I caught glimpses of figures, dark, indistinct silhouettes that slipped away whenever I tried to focus. The cold pressed against me, chilling me through my clothes, making every breath visible in the frigid air. I called out, voice cracking, "Who's here? What do you want?" The silence that followed was deafening, but I sensed a response not with my ears but with the hair standing on end across my skin, an unspoken communication of sorrow and anger. That night, as the house settled into an uneasy quiet, I realized the oppressive atmosphere wasn't just a trick of the mind or the natural creaks of an old building. It was something more, a lingering presence born of pain and fear. I remembered the stories about Agnes, her fear of losing her mind, her desperate attempts to hold on to sanity amidst the chaos. It was as if the house itself fed on that terror, growing stronger with each scream and each overturned chair. The next evening, I decided to stay awake, determined to confront whatever was tormenting this place. I stationed myself in the main hallway, flashlight in hand, ready for whatever might come. Hours passed in silence, the house seeming to hold its breath. Then, just as I began to think the night would pass uneventfully, a figure appeared at the end of the corridor. It was faint at first, a shimmer of light and shadow blending into the darkness. As my eyes adjusted, the outline became clearer, a tall, spectral woman, her face pale and eyes hollow, standing motionless yet radiating a silent menace. My heart raced, but I forced myself to stay calm. The apparition did not speak or move, simply watching with an intensity that pierced through me. The air around her crackled with energy, the temperature dropping sharply. I took a slow step forward, voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "Who are you? Why are you here?" The figure remained silent, but the room seemed to respond. The walls pulsed, the floorboards creaked, and the shadows deepened as if alive. The house itself was alive, and this spirit was its guardian or prisoner, bound by some tragic past. Summoning every ounce of courage, I raised my hand and reached out, though the apparition did not recede or react. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, until finally, the figure dissipated like smoke, leaving behind a lingering chill. That moment was a turning point. I realized that the house's restless spirits were not malevolent, merely trapped in a cycle of pain and fear. My presence had awakened them, and now, I was entwined in their story. Over the following days, the encounters continued. I would hear faint whispers calling my name, catch glimpses of shadowy forms in the corners of my vision, and feel sudden cold drafts that moved with intention. Each experience was a reminder that I was not alone. I began to document everything, hoping to piece together the history and find a way to bring peace to the house. The more I learned about Agnes and those who had come before, the clearer it became that these spirits were echoes of lives disrupted, souls unable to move on. Despite the fear, I felt a strange connection to the house, as if it were a living entity sharing its pain and history with me. I was no longer just a tenant but a participant in a story that stretched across time. One night, as I sat in the dim light of the study, I heard a soft singing drifting from the attic, a lullaby, haunting and beautiful. It was a sound filled with sorrow and longing, a voice reaching out from the past. I followed the melody upstairs, heart heavy but determined. In the attic, the air was thick with emotion, and the shadows seemed to gather, forming shapes that told stories of love, loss, and regret. Standing there, bathed in the pale moonlight filtering through the cracked window, I understood that the house was not just haunted by ghosts but by memories, by moments frozen in time. I knew I had to face these spirits, to confront the pain that bound them here. It was no longer enough to observe, I had to engage, to reach out and offer the possibility of release. The house had revealed its darkest secrets, and I was ready to meet them head-on. Fear still lingered, but it was tempered by a growing resolve. I would not turn away from the shadows, instead, I would step into them, ready to uncover the truth and, hopefully, bring peace to the restless souls within. After weeks of restless nights and mounting unease, I realized I needed help. The house's presence was no longer just a whisper or a shadow, it had become an overwhelming force that I couldn't handle alone. I reached out to a local paranormal expert, someone recommended by the librarian, a woman named Evelyn who had spent years studying haunted places and helping restless spirits find peace. Evelyn arrived on a cold afternoon, carrying an assortment of tools, a small box of herbs, candles, and a leather-bound book filled with rituals and incantations. She listened carefully as I recounted my experiences, nodding with a knowing expression. "This house is saturated with energy," she said softly. "Pain, loss, and fear have imprinted themselves here, but that doesn't mean it can't be cleansed." We began the ritual in the main hallway, the heart of the house's activity. Evelyn lit the candles, their flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the peeling wallpaper. She sprinkled sage and lavender around the room, their scents mingling in the cold air. Then she chanted softly, words in a language I didn't recognize, weaving a protective circle as a gentle hum filled the space. As the ritual progressed, the atmosphere shifted. The oppressive weight that had pressed on my chest lightened, replaced by a fragile calm. The shadows receded, and the cold spots warmed ever so slightly. The house seemed to breathe, as if exhaling after a long-held breath. But the relief was tentative. Evelyn warned me that the spirits were not gone, only pacified for now. "This is a fragile piece," she said. "They're still here, waiting. The house remembers everything." That night, I slept more soundly than I had in weeks, but the experiences had left their mark. I awoke with a mixture of exhaustion and clarity, my mind racing with questions about what I had witnessed and how it had changed me. Living in the house became a delicate balance between fear and fascination. I found myself walking the halls with a heightened awareness, sensing the unseen presence but no longer paralyzed by it. The whispers were quieter, the shadows less threatening, yet I knew the house's history was still alive beneath the surface. Emotionally, I felt drained yet oddly empowered. The encounters forced me to confront my own fears, of the unknown, of death, and of loneliness. They challenged my understanding of reality and stretched the limits of what I believed possible. I struggled with disbelief, questioning whether it was all just my imagination or something more profound. At the same time, I developed a deep respect for the spirits, for the lives that had been lived and lost within these walls. They were not malevolent entities but echoes of pain and longing, trapped between worlds. I felt a strange kinship with them, a connection forged through shared vulnerability. In quiet moments, I would sit by the window, watching the moonlight spill across the garden, reflecting on how much this experience had changed me. The house, with all its darkness and mystery, had become a part of my story, shaping my perspective on life and death. Despite the lingering unease, I found a measure of satisfaction in having faced the unknown. I had stepped into the shadows and refused to be consumed by them. I had learned to coexist with the house's haunted past, finding courage in the face of fear. The house was no longer just a building to me, it was a living testament to resilience and memory. It held stories that demanded to be heard, and I had become their reluctant guardian. As days passed, the fragile peace held, and I continued to live amidst the echoes, aware that the house's secrets might never fully be unraveled. But for now, there was a quiet hope, a belief that, through understanding and acceptance, even the darkest shadows can find their light.